All right. By staying on this meeting, consent to being live streamed. Anyone with access to the live stream can watch or share with others. And I'm clicking got it. So it says we are now live.
And you guys are live, so.
Yay.
Hey, Jeff.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Hey, Jeff, do you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay.
We'll give it 30 more seconds and then we will get going with today's session.
And then you guys are going to turn our videos on when we're on. We're off video and meanwhile, right? Brian?
I believe you'll turn your own video on, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for the first Ingram Micro SLED Summit. Your hosts for today's session are myself and my peer Adam Knobloch. We'd like to start by stating, if you have any questions specific to the content presented today, please email myself or Adam directly, and we can coordinate a shared response for the group. The content crafted today is focused on technical market intelligence, CIO engagement strategies, and technology consumption from an end user's perspective. Our goal today is to enable you, our partner ecosystem, as you provide value, helping solve your customers' business needs in this $200 billion marketplace. Jeff, can you walk us through the agenda today?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian, so much for allowing me the opportunity to participate. Everyone, I'm so happy and excited to be in front of you today, coming to you from Buffalo, New York. Just real quick, an introduction of myself. I'm Jeff Brown, the Director of Sales and Strategic Alliance here at Ingram Micro Public Sector. And on the call today is my boss, Tony Celesti, who many of you I know, and he's certainly available throughout this session if you guys have questions that come up. We're super excited about the agenda that we have prepared for you this afternoon, and I'm even more excited about the opportunity that we have in front of us. This is a huge manifestation of that opportunity, and what great partnerships that we have. Some of our best and most strategic vendors are part of this call today, and of course all the resellers in attendance, and even our industry experts that have joined us and are going to add value this afternoon. So we will go through the SLED market overview and analysis, touch a little bit about the inside of the mind of a CIO, and then talk a lot about the impact of technology on law enforcement. It's super exciting. Then we'll head into the vendor panel that we think we've prepared a really good panel for you guys to pick their brains and hear what's going on. Then we're going to close it out with the Ingram Micro E-Rate program and our finance options that will keep all this stuff going. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Sean McSpaden, and he will take us into the SLED market overview and analysis.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Well, it's a great pleasure to be with you all this morning. My name is Sean McSpaden. I serve as a senior fellow for the Center for Digital Government. About 25 years, this will be my 25th year in Oregon state government, the first 15 years in the executive branch. The last 5.5 years or so of that time, I served as Oregon's Deputy State Chief Information Officer. For the last 9 years, I've worked for the Oregon Legislature as the committee administrator for Oregon's Joint Legislative Committee on Information Management and Technology. Again, very pleased to be with you here in my capacity as a senior fellow for the Center for Digital Government. Next slide, please. Great, thanks much. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'll have a chance to talk with you all about the near-term outlook for priorities and tech funding in the state and local government marketplace, talk with you a bit about future trends, and then close with what we believe are some growth opportunities for the reseller community. Next slide, please. So suffice it to say that in our view, the outlook for the state and local government and education marketplace across the country is good, with greatly increased IT spending in 2022. We believe it's going to continue to ramp up in 2023. Certainly that spending is driven largely by an influx of federal funding, and largely that funding will focus on infrastructure modernization, cybersecurity, and automation. Certainly, the need to modernize our infrastructure, including our computing infrastructure, is going to be paramount. Next slide, please. So as I indicated, according to the studies that we've done as a center, and certainly that we've seen from our partners, IT spending across the nation is, certainly increased in 2022 at an estimated 7% clip, as compared to 2021. And, certainly, according to our figures, we believe that spending topped out north of 130 billion across the nation. Next slide, please. Certainly for 2023, as I mentioned, we believe that that spending will continue to increase, at a healthy pace, and it's going to keep on growing for the foreseeable future for a whole bunch of reasons. Even though we do expect at some point this federal funding will taper off, and certainly state and local governments will have to continue, the modernization trends, the maintenance and support on their own. But at this point, we believe there's a healthy glide path for the next several years. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about CIO priorities. And the good news for all of you who serve the state and local government and education marketplace is that there seems to be tremendous alignment in regard to local government CIO priorities at the county and city level, and for state government CIOs at the enterprise or agency level. We see tremendous crossover, tremendous alignment, regardless of jurisdiction. And, of course, it's no surprise to anybody, cybersecurity reigns supreme with, within that category, identity management, multi-factor authentication, and cloud computing, and other technology deployments embedded within that kind of mega trend. Certainly, in addition, citizen engagement, digital transformation initiatives, as I mentioned, cloud computing adoption and broadband infrastructure deployment. Those are common topics regardless of jurisdiction. And then certainly we all have a great focus on workforce, the recruitment, training, and retention angle, and particularly trying to figure out better ways to serve not just a remote workforce as we all had to experience or enable during the pandemic, but now this hybrid workforce environment where some employers are at the state and local government level are bringing all of their employees back into the brick and mortar operation. Others are being quite a bit more permissive. And so, you as technology vendors and partners need to be prepared to support a whole variety of choices in terms of workforce, and certainly the need for technology solutions to better serve our internal employees. Next slide, please. So, certainly since March 2020 or so, as part of the pandemic stimulus packages, there's been nearly $1 trillion in federal funding that's been directed to state and local governments and educational organizations across the country. It's something, certainly that is, clearly unprecedented, but, it's created a whole variety of challenges, and including, as well as opportunities for this marketplace. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide. So, certainly 90+% of the nation's critical infrastructure, if you've heard the studies, that amount of our infrastructure across the country is owned and operated by the private sector. But, government organizations at the state and local government level, they also have an essential role to play in upgrading, securing, and managing much of the nation's roads and bridges, certainly. Municipal water, sewer, and electrical utilities across the country. And certainly, with this push for modernization, more and more of those systems, one, are vulnerable to cybersecurity attack, but also are network enabled. And so, certainly it's something for the technology community to pay attention to. Over $1 trillion in additional funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and other sources. It's beginning to roll out. Certainly, state and local governments are getting direct allocations, but they're also in the process of submitting their grant applications for, sometimes a one-time request, but certainly most of these programs are multiple federal fiscal years, 3, 4, 5 years in nature. So certainly that funding, with its period of performance being 3 to 4 years beyond the grant application, this funding could last for a decade or more. Something to keep in mind. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening today, and we did a bit of that, and what's happening next. So let me make sure we're on the right slide. We are. Great. So we see at the Center for Digital Government a variety of macro trends in the state and local government marketplace. They're being driven by changing citizen, stakeholder, and employee expectations, certainly by a new wave of government and education leaders. Their thinking is changing, along with, this recognition for this, perhaps once in a lifetime, once in a career opportunity with this increased funding. The funding, again, this new thinking, new way of doing is enabling, the adoption and agile deployment of cloud solutions, which has set the stage for digital transformation of government systems and infrastructure. Next slide. And with these opportunities, with the new funding being funneled through the system, state and local governments, educational organizations, they're in the process of responding. They recognize that the need is high. It's accelerating. Modernization and digital transformation, along with concerns about privacy and security, and the need to ensure that we have a diverse, inclusive, and equitable workforce, are all top of mind concerns for state and local government leaders, regardless of state, regardless of jurisdiction. Next slide. So I've hit on these, the bulleted items here a couple of times throughout the presentation, but I wanted to re-emphasize that these really are the key drivers that we see in state and local government and in the education marketplace, whether it's K through 12 or higher education. There's, of course, a dramatic infusion of federal funding. That really is a key theme. A focus on cybersecurity, enhanced resident experience, broadband, and ensuring that as it's deployed, as connectivity is improved across our communities, that it's not just there for use, but it's also accessible and affordable. Certainly, with that broadband deployment, that's going to enable diverse and increasingly remote and hybrid public sector workforce. I know here in Oregon, we just implemented a payroll system as part of our broader human resource information system modernization program. And that project had to delay its implementation because it had to accommodate Oregon employees who now live in other states, making sure that we're properly withholding. Just not something that we would have thought of just a few years ago. And of course, you see state and local and education organizations advertising for positions, remote or hybrid, all the time now. It's just a new day. And certainly this need for broadband infrastructure deployment, having it be accessible and affordable, is key to all of that. Next slide. So I'd like to turn to a brief discussion about workforce. Certainly, we've focused a lot on funding, but really in the studies that we've seen, in a recent study that one of our partner organizations, GovTech Industry Navigator, the top challenge today is no longer funding. It's staffing. It's having appropriate numbers of staff with the right expertise, training, the right capabilities. First of all, to have them, but second, to be able to recruit and train them and keep them over time. Just a key challenge for all public jurisdictions, regardless of sector. Next slide. And, certainly along with kind of that top line figure that by survey, it's one of our top challenges. We have the data to back it up. In the public sector, we've had a series of challenges that are difficult to overcome. Again, as I mentioned, insufficient staffing. It's a do or die situation for us. To put simply, the data confirms it. Public sector organizations at all levels, they're simply struggling to find qualified applicants. And the number of job applications per job has dropped over 20% over the last 5 years alone. So certainly a concern. It's not getting any better. And what that means is a great opportunity for technology vendors and partners like yourself to help state and local government and education organizations bridge that gap. Next slide. And as I mentioned, to mitigate this issue, survey after survey of state and local government staff tells us that, clearly the ability of our employees to work remotely, to have a better quality of life balance, it'll remain critical for recruitment and retention, for the foreseeable future. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, state and local government organizations, they can use your help. They need your knowledge, your expertise, the ability to access your managed services and your staff augmentation services on an expedited basis. I mentioned this I had a chance to speak at the Ingram Micro event down in Orlando a few months ago, and I mentioned to the group at that time, there's nothing more frustrating as a state CIO or deputy state CIO than to get excited about the set of products and services that a company who's been talking with us can provide to our jurisdiction, but then to find out that we can't easily access their services because they're not on any contract we can use, whether that be a collaborative procurement through the NASPO value point, or whether that be on a statewide price agreement or discrete contract that we might have in place. So that's one of the key things that I would just implore you all to make sure that you, as you work with state and local government and educational organizations, in all of the states across the nation, that you make sure that when you're pitching your products and services that can be easily gotten to through contract vehicles. Sounds pretty simple, but I will tell you, in my experience, it's happened more times than not. Again, a frustrating experience. But in addition to that, public sector organizations also need, they've got to convince leaders in their organization to prioritize their initiatives, to make needed investments, and to do that. A lot of times, the greatest selling point is a use case from another public sector client that you all are serving, something that provides clear and convincing business cases, so that it's easier for those professionals within each state to convince their leaders to make the investment. So certainly some homework on your part, the ability for you to come with clear examples, with references that we can call, folks we can contact who can, essentially vouch for the products and services you're providing to other public sector clients across the nation. Next slide. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, this mega trend of cybersecurity, it's with us. It's going to be with us for probably the rest of our natural born life, so to speak. And certainly recent studies conducted earlier this year reveal 10 top cybersecurity initiatives for SLED organizations. In addition to focus on cloud security and disaster recovery and business continuity. Those state and local government and educational organizations, they're primarily interested in making demonstrable progress in the areas of data security, employee awareness and training, and of course, cybersecurity risk assessment. Next slide. Those same leaders, they're paying so much attention to cybersecurity that legislators, boards and councils and commissions at the local government level, they're passing municipal ordinances. They're, passing additional statutes. Governors are issuing executive orders, most recently, around the prohibition of use of certain kinds of technology within federal, state, and local government organizations. There's really just been an exponential rise in this executive, statutory, or policy guidance and directive around cybersecurity at the state and local government level, and it's not expected to diminish anytime soon. So it's something to keep in mind, something certainly your government relations staff can work with legislators, with governor's offices, with county commissions and boards to try to make the right choices on what their statutes and municipal codes ultimately end up saying. Next slide. And certainly, the federal government, as we've mentioned, with a variety of funding streams, in particular the infrastructure law, we expect these monies to start flowing to state and local governments very, very soon in this area, cybersecurity. I know for Oregon, we're like most states. They didn't have a statewide whole of government cybersecurity plan in the can, so to speak. They didn't have a cybersecurity planning committee that was multi-jurisdictional in nature with the right mix of technical and policy and executive leaders. And so, we're all kind of, under the gun, so to speak, to develop those plans. And so most states made their initial grant applications focused on that plan development, but soon in the second half of this year, more money for implementation projects are going to be distributed primarily, again, to local governments as the law requires. Next slide. But as with, any area of IT, but specifically this one, as I mentioned several times, state and local government IT leaders, they need help. They can't solve this cybersecurity challenge on their own. It takes a village, so to speak. Cybersecurity is a team sport after all. And the insights and best practices and innovative products and services that you all can provide us, there's never been a greater need for it. So certainly encourage your continued outreach to state and local government and education cybersecurity leaders to make sure that they're aware of how the marketplace is changing and the new opportunities that exist for them. Next slide. And finally, I'd like to close my time with you with a recap of sorts. All of the information I've shared in regard to government challenges, priorities, and trends. There are also growth opportunities for the reseller community. Next slide. So again, just a list. I won't go through them in the interest of time, but these are the emerging opportunities that we see in state and local government and education across the nation. They're the key priorities of IT leaders in each of these jurisdiction types. They're also they're areas in which the private sector can play your most important role for us. We've been doing the same thing in the same way for 20, 30, 40 years sometimes. And, unless you've got a brand new set of leaders in an organization that are up to date on everything that the private sector is doing, again, we really need your help and we really need your expertise. Next slide. And we do, of course, as a center, we see this for you all and for us in state and local government and education. It's an historic and unprecedented moment. We believe with an unprecedented market opportunity for you all, with nearly $2 trillion in federal funding alone funneled to state and local government. As I mentioned, for the first time in a long time, your client's top challenge may not be funding. It's capacity. It's the lack of capacity to plan and implement. It's the lack of needed staffing and expertise. And this is really where you can come in and partner with government at all levels to increase our chances for success. Next slide. And so, at the Center for Digital Government, we do believe that the strongest opportunities moving forward will be in the state and local government marketplace for the reasons that I've expressed to you over the last 20 or so minutes. Next slide. So here's my contact information. Certainly feel free to reach out on behalf of the Center for Digital Government. It's been a great pleasure talking with you all this afternoon. Certainly I'm looking forward to one of my colleagues, discussions, talks with you all here coming up in a moment. It's been a great pleasure to be with you this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of such a great event.
Thank you very much, Sean. We appreciate your time. In if there's any questions, Sean's direct contact information is illustrated on the slide deck that you can see. If you feel more comfortable reaching out to Adam and myself, by all means, don't hesitate to go either route. So now, as we pivot into the day in the life of a CIO, we have Craig Orgeron with us. Craig, can you take some time to talk a little bit about your experiences and your background in the technology community?
Sure, Brian, thanks. So first off, just like Sean, thanks for having me today, the Ingram Micro Public Sector Summit. So I'm a former state CIO in the great state of Mississippi. Worked for 3 different governors, so I kind of understand the transition of being a CIO for about 10 years. Did that, left government. I did a 2-year stint with Amazon Web Services, so I really got to see the other side, especially, I think, as Sean noted, the dynamicness and the paradigm changing kind of capabilities of cloud. And now I'm a college professor, so I get to work with the center, and I get to teach this kind of stuff to aspiring leaders coming out of school with a business degree.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Craig. Yeah, as we pivot into this, engaging a CIO, can you take some time and talk a little bit about what a day in the life of a state CIO actually looks like? Can you give us a peek behind the curtain in regards to what happens after you swipe in and walk into the state capitol and go about your business?
Well, the days are busy, as you can imagine. I was actually locally. Went to a legislative reception last night here in town. So our legislature is meeting. So I think there's several buckets, Brian, that a CIO spends his or her time with, on day in and day out. One, of course, is just operational excellence, right? You're running an organization, and that organization is providing services out, right, to state government agencies in the state of Mississippi. It could also be local government agencies. By way of example, our statewide network in Mississippi is shared among higher ed, K-12, community college, in addition to all of the state agencies. So it's a very enterprise kind of effort. So a lot of time with the team on sort of the operational components, right? I mean, I think that's part of your role. You may have a deputy or a chief operations officer or a chief technology officer who helps you with that. But clearly, if you're sitting in the chair, I think that's critical. I put at the top of the list also agency interaction, right? I mean, a lot of times there can be mandates in states to use services that are coming out of a state CIO's office, but those relationships are just critical, right? The relationships with your peer agency heads. I think a day in the life is focused on operations, and it's focused on those relationships. So one of the things that's typically not talked about a lot, Sean mentioned all this funding that's coming down, and I agree totally with his analogy. It's a team sport, right? So it may not just be a team sport in cyber, as some of these funding solutions potentially impact modernization or transformation efforts. You need to have friends, and those friends need to be the commissioner of social services or the commissioner of public safety. You need to be close to those folks as peers, right? So not only providing excellent operational and technical services, but you need to spend time with them. I think typically, these CIO jobs, they have become political. I don't know that there's a better word to describe it, but you need to spend time in that space as well, right? And that could be not just with the governor and the governor's team, but elected officials in general. And of course, during the legislative season, as you noted, Brian, time at the Capitol. So yes, you'll be called upon to do budget hearings and that kind of thing, but there could be technology committees. There could be a host of receptions. It's really candidly relationship building, right? It's making the case as a CIO for the kinds of things that a state or any jurisdiction needs to do to move forward. So I think that third one is important. And lastly, I think what I would add is a version of what you're doing today with your team, and that is vendor relationships, right? So Sean had some just excellent points that I completely agree with, which is, the CIO is a bit of a broker these days. Nasio talked about this CIO as a broker model. You're brokering potentially many different sorts of services. So the funding picture looks good. And Sean talked about the workforce challenges. So with that, you need partners. And again, from a relationship perspective, I think you need excellent relationship with the vendor community. So back of the napkin, I think that's potentially what a typical day might look like. And you're juggling those things and you're hoping nothing bad happens.
Appreciate that, Craig. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You brought up something that was, I think is core critical to the reseller in the manufacturing community, and that's relationships. Can you provide suggestions in regards to how to build effective relationships at the executive level, at the state CIO level?
Sure. Yeah. So I think in that space, there's a couple of things that are top of mind. I think it's important to be cognizant of the overarching chain of command, right? So that might be big picture, does the CIO, or is he or she appointed by the governor? Do they work underneath a finance department of sorts or some administrative department? So there are some CIOs who are designated as state CIO, but they may come underneath some other cabinet secretary. Knowing that is important, right? I think at the macro level. Beyond that and slightly below that, Brian, I think is sort of understanding in the CIO organization, what does that structure look like? Because, I think to be really effective, you're going to want to build relationships vertically and horizontally. Number one. Two, I think be well versed in whatever strategic or master plan the state may have. No two states necessarily do them the same, but I think my own experience in Mississippi, we had a strategic master plan, which we actually updated annually. Some states do every 2 years. It'd be different. We also had an infrastructure and an architecture plan. So those documents were not heavy lifts. We didn't want them to be. They were very strategic. Ingest those. I think it's important too, Sean touched on this, be cognizant of not just the state's procurement rules and regulations, but specifically, are there any open procurements? Sort of be aware that those conversations would need to be sort of handled delicately, right? That there's a particular time and place to talk about them. And there may be rules, as an example, and it may be common practice, but in Mississippi, if a procurement was active, we sort of had a cone of silence, in terms of which you can talk about or can't talk about. So I think when you sort of put those things together, the big picture chain of command, understanding the strategy in the state, not just understanding the rules of the road on procurement, but sort of what's open and where the state's going. That I think those are components, Brian, in terms of what makes for effective engagement and great relationship building.
Thank you. When you look at the multiple platforms that are available to reach out to a state CIO, you have LinkedIn, you have Twitter, email, you have multiple avenues to reach out to you. What are some of the most successful channels that the reseller and the manufacturing community could use to engage as they try and build relationships with you?
Yeah, great question. And I will say it can be a little bit confusing, with those channels. As Sean was certainly, so I was am a big proponent of NASCIO for state CIOs. I had the distinct pleasure of serving as president during my state CIO tenure. It's a wonderful place. NASCIO has gotten much more receptive to fostering relationships during the mid-year conference, which is generally late April or May, or the annual conference, which is September, October. If if the partner community can get there, doing an introduction is great that way, in my opinion. The other channels can be challenging, Brian, I think, because there's such state CIOs can be inundated by tons of requests from all over. So I think some sort of way to make a very personal connection, if possible. So as an example, the center does digital government summits in many states, right, which is a smaller venue than like a NASCIO conference where there's upwards of, there could be 800 to 1,000. So those are phenomenal. We started in 2011, 2012 in Mississippi doing a digital government conference. So even in a smaller state like ours, we were probably attracting 300 to 400. That's a wonderful place, to make some personal connections. I think maybe a little bit old school, but I think that personal connection to get started is one of the best ways to go.
That, when you look at it as a reseller, manufacturer, distributor, let's say hypothetically speaking, we've had some interactions. There's an interest at a surface level in regards to hearing more about our story. What are some successful tips that you could provide in how we as a reseller engage and try to illustrate value to get into your office, to have that meeting to where we can help address your business needs through our technology portfolios?
Yeah, so great question. Two thoughts come to mind. First, and I think Sean mentioned this, so the use case scenario is just critical, right? I mean, so the Center for Digital Government and sort of the ecosystem that it has across the country, NASCIO, it's a pretty tight community. The folks that really choose to engage can be very connected. So I was always able to pick up the phone and call Sean in Oregon, or call Dugan, or call someone and say, hey, I'm doing this. What do you think? I think it's important also to, beyond use cases, I think it's important to, many times a state CIO is working with an agency on a solution or service. I think bringing those two together, Brian, are really potentially important. Like if you are talking with the Department of Public Safety or the Department of Revenue, that's really an overarching best practice for engagement, is to have both sort of sets of engagement happening together, both with a state CIO's office who may have some enterprise purview over different parts of a solution or service. Could be infrastructure, could be contracting, but then many times the line of business agencies are really, to be candid, the ones delivering the service, procuring it, building it. So I think use case of how a solution can be effective, can drive down price, can drive up value, and then marrying the CIO's office with a line of business agency or agencies, I think you won't be missing much if that occurs.
Thank you. So be gentle in this one, Craig. I'm going to ask you, can you share, some potholes in maybe a real life example of what not to do when reaching out, and what does an unsuccessful engagement look like?
Oh gosh. So I think, and we can get into these. I think any of the things that we talked about that are viewed as positive, to not do those well would be negative, right? So by way of example, to not be conversant with the rules of the road on procurement, would tend to create some challenging scenarios. To be candid, be thoughtful about the line of business agencies and the state CAO from an alignment perspective, right? So many times you can have, a challenging scenario whereby those things aren't aligned for whatever the reason might be, right? A solution that's outside the bounds of the state's enterprise architecture, a procurement challenge, something like that. I think. So I think typically in my experience, and Sean noted this, and I thought he was spot on, all things procurement. I think procurement really drives a lot, not getting crossways with that, working to have alignment with the line of business agency and the state CIO's office. Of course, the flip side is, to be really candid, as you asked the question, don't create misalignment. Right. Don't sort of play into that as best you can, putting those things together and aligning. I think too, I would add thirdly, be a good listener, right? I think there's a dialogue. I personally came to appreciate engagement because it was a chance to learn, right? So many people on my team over the years, to be completely transparent, there would be a meeting and it would just be sort of the eye roll kind of thing, not another one. And I think when I worked on myself to sort of change the mindset to, this 30 or 45 minutes or hour is about learning what's out there, asking questions, taking that information and sort of synthesizing it continually into the strategy of where the state should go is key. So I think being able to listen well would be my third one.
Thank you. As resellers, we in manufacturers, we typically have stronger relationships with either the technical teams or on the procurement side of the house.
Yeah.
Two-part question: how important is it to have relationships on both avenues at the end user? As well as, how often are you guys integrating discussions and alignment in regards to what your mutual priorities are at from a purchasing organization as well as a technical organization?
That's a phenomenal question. So I would argue that it's critically important to have relationships with both, which is how you started. I think ultimately you can develop rapport at the C-suite, whatever that might be in a state CIO, but engagement with technical teams is an absolute must. It's just a must because, and I'll tease myself and CIO some, we can be pie in the sky with what we want to do or how we want to do it and sort of gloss over, to be candid, some of the details that some of these things aren't easy to do. So I think relationships with the technical teams are important. Relationships with procurement is of utmost importance as well, which you pointed out, right? So again, not just rules of the road, but you can have relationships. If you're doing regular business, I think you can have relationships. So my experience in Mississippi was mildly unique because all of technology procurement, hardware, software, services fell under the organization that I ran. In some states, the procurement organization is maybe separate. Maybe it's under a finance or an administrative department. And then there's some dotted line responsibility back to the CIO. In my instance, both of those things lived under one umbrella. So making that connection between technical requirements and procurement was a bit less of a lift, but I think you're smart to note that as a potential challenge of how do you blend those things together. Some of the things I think too that you're talking about and that Sean talked about really speak to the challenge of procurement moving forward, right? And it would be disingenuous of me not to say, I think once I left government and was able to sort of view it first through the private sector, kind of looking back on it, and now even in a different role as a college professor and with the Center for Digital Government, I have a completely different take on it. You know, I really look back on procurement as, in some ways, it's its own solar system, you know, and it has gravity. It was really never meant to be that. You know, it was meant to be a way to solve a business problem. And I would love to see some of what happens in public procurement remain rigorous, but also really be modernized in a way that states can use the kind of funding that Sean talked about that's coming down to modernize systems, make them more resilient, and really enhance digital services, which is what we learned during COVID.
You, Craig. As we wrap up, we've got time for one more question. In the question that's popped up, Craig, is you know, if you could put a spotlight on 2 to 3 best practices / characteristics, however you want to term it, you know, for the resellers in the manufacturers that are joining us today, and say, do more of X. You know, what would that look like for you as you put your state CIO hat back on?
I would sort of go back and I'll be candid with you, just sort of doing this with pops into my head. Listen well when you sit down. Build relationships, and in the public sector, the sales cycles can be longer by the nature of how government moves. So listen well, build relationships, and I think be really in tune to the strategic direction of the state. In other words, when you listen and when you build relationships, know where the state's going and sort of understand the portfolio that you have and position that portfolio in sort of a success-oriented journey and outcome, and I think you'll be successful.
Craig, I want to thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And if there's any questions for Craig, as always, please don't hesitate to reach out to Adam or myself, and we could filter those questions and get them to Craig and provide composite answers to all of the attendees today. So Craig, thank you very much for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you much.
Awesome. So as we pivot into technology consumption in the law enforcement community, we have Lieutenant Pat Kinney of the Chicago Police Department joining us. Pat is a lieutenant within the Bureau of Detectives. And he's going to talk today about technology utilization and how they utilize that in law enforcement. And Pat, Lieutenant, I don't want to steal any of your thunder. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to you as you turn your camera on and get rolling.
Great, thanks, Brian. Just making sure you could hear me. All right, good to go. So just want to thank Ingram Micro, Jeff, Adam, Brian, and the rest of their team for allowing me to present today. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I'm going to be honest, I truly believe that these types of interactions, these non-sales type of interactions where an end user like myself can kind of tell you what's out there, what I'm dealing with, the technology that I'm looking at, the problems, the hurdles I'm dealing with, and maybe provide you guys with some ideas for solutions to then come back to the public sector entity like a law enforcement agency like myself. So again, appreciate this opportunity. I hope everyone gets something out of this. Like Brian said, my name is Pat Kinney. I'm a lieutenant with the Chicago Police Department. I have over 17 years of law enforcement experience, all of that within the Chicago Police Department. I currently am within the Bureau of Detectives. I oversee our investigative response team, which is this team that investigates when an officer discharges their weapon or when an officer is shot. I also oversee all the technology tools that are used within the Bureau of Detectives, which we'll kind of dive a little deeper into as this presentation goes on. Prior to making lieutenant, I was a sergeant in one of our area technology centers. Again, I'll talk about that later on, what that is, what that team's comprised of, and the tools we're utilizing to help solve crime. I was a former patrol sergeant. I was a homicide detective, where I actually dealt with a lot of the issues that I'm going to be bringing up and the hurdles that we dealt with in investigations as a detective. I was a police officer in our Crime Prevention Information Center, which is our fusion center. One of these centers were created after 9/11 in order to conduct information sharing for the fails of what occurred during 9/11, where everybody had a piece of the puzzle, but nobody was sharing it. Since then, we created these fusion centers, CPIC being one of them. Kind of a quick history about my law enforcement experience. But again, today I'm going to kind of change what we were talking about with Craig and Sean's presentations, which were kind of higher level from the CIO side of the house. But what I want to talk about is the end user side, my side of it, where the detective, the boots on the grounds, how they're going to use the technologies that these vendors, your vendors, are providing, and where it can help them in their cases. We're going to get a little more specific to one sector, obviously, me being in law enforcement. We're going to talk about law enforcement sector, and then we're going to dig deeper into exactly how we're using technology to solve violent crime investigations. I want to talk about our current model, the history of where we're at, and then the challenges and solutions, and then maybe provide you with a couple of ideas on how you could help solve the challenges that I know I'm dealing with in law enforcement, which means that almost every law enforcement agency across the country is probably dealing with the same type of thing. Next, no, we could stay on the slide. I apologize. So trends in law enforcement, again, kind of put on your investigative hat right now, because we're going to be focused on that side of the house, the Bureau Detective side. We were dealing with a countrywide issue of witness cooperation. This can be attributed to many different things. In Chicago, we attribute it to a police-involved shooting where a person was murdered by a Chicago police officer, Laquan McDonald, in 2014. The video was released due to a court order in 2015, which caused a lot of people being rightfully upset and protests, and the trust in law enforcement in Chicago specifically started to go down the tube. So we had to deal with that. It hurt our cases because we weren't able to bring in witnesses to help point out who the offenders were in homicides and non-fatal shootings. There also is a very genuine fear of retaliation when dealing with witnesses in violent crimes. Most of the violent crimes that occur in cities are happening in specific areas where a specific witness may be known to the offender or be known to the neighborhood. And if they are seen cooperating with law enforcement, like I said, they have a genuine fear and that they can be retaliated against and be victims of a homicide or aggravated battery themselves. So we had to figure out a way to overcome this. What we also seen around this time, this is the 2015 to 2018 time range, was that there was a substantial increase in the availability of digital evidence. What I mean by that is we were seeing more and more homes with video cameras, businesses with video cameras, suspects, offenders, witnesses with cell phone videos, call detail records from phone carriers or mobile carriers hitting off cell towers, smart vehicles. But we lacked, as a police department, as a detective bureau, we lacked the technical knowledge on how to properly recover this information, this digital evidence, how to process it, and then present it to our stakeholders, the state's attorney, to present to them why we say that bad guy A committed crime X. And again, all of these hurdles slow down our investigations. If you can go to the next slide, please. You can see this is kind of a really good example, a real world example of what those hurdles were doing to us. So you can see on this, this is a chart of the clearance rates of homicides that occurred within the city of Chicago, in the total homicides and then the total homicides cleared. And you can see from 2013 to about 2018, it didn't matter how many homicides we had. It didn't matter how many detectives we applied to the problem. We always hovered around that 200 mark, the 210 to 220 mark for all of those years. We could not get over that. But now if you look at, oh, you can go back to that, please. If you go back to, if you look at 2020, you see a substantial increase. We jumped our homicide clearance, the number of murders we cleared up to 354, then in 400 in 2021, and to 352 in 2022. Next slide, please. So what did we do as a police department? How did we change the trend in the average of us solving only about 200 murders? Well, I'm going to attribute it to technology and the creation of our technology centers. In 2019, we did a countrywide research into what other departments are doing differently than we are doing. What we found is that a lot of departments had a lot of different pieces of technology that helped them with investigations, violent crime investigations specifically, but they were varied across different bureaus within the department. So, for example, their patrol division may have had license plate readers. Their detective division may have had the ability to extract cell phone data. So we went out and we said, okay, all of these tools have been proven in these other departments to help solve the investigations. What if we brought them under one center, one location within each detective area? So we went out, we partnered with the University of Chicago, and we created the first area technology center in one of our detective bureaus. The Chicago Police Department is made up of 22 police districts. It's further broken down into 5 detective areas. The first one was down far south, which had a high propensity for violence. A lot of crimes occurred there, a lot of violent crimes and homicides occurred there. And we applied this area technology center model to that. We went out, we conducted interviews with hundreds of police officers in the Chicago Police Department who had an interest in digital evidence. We wanted to be able to identify the ones that had some sort of knowledge in digital evidence, but more importantly, had the interest in it, because we can hire for character, we could train for their technical skills. And that's kind of the model we looked at. We also then took and we dedicated these people. They no longer had to drive around in a beat car. They no longer had to sit on a corner to protect this particular area. Their sole purpose was digital evidence collectors, processors, and presenters. We brought in numerous amounts of vendors and we trained them on video forensics, other types of digital evidence forensics, collection, preservation, mobile forensics, vehicle forensics. Next slide, please. That first model down on the far south side of the city obviously proved its worth because the amount of murders that we were clearing started to increase after its first year of existence. So the higher ups in the Chicago Police Department, obviously seeing that this will work for us, they have since increased it to 6 centers throughout the city of Chicago, 6 ATCs, with over 100 members within these centers. Now, this is a number that I like to point out quite often, is the number of over 100 members. If you think of the traditional way detectives investigated crimes and recovered evidence, it was through physical evidence, blood spatter, shell casings, DNA, fingerprints, which are all great tools in our investigations. But we are now slowly transitioning to more of a digital evidence-based case. Our evidence technicians in the city of Chicago, there's about 140 of them. Our digital evidence technicians in the ATCs, there's over 100 of them at this point. So it shows you how much of an emphasis the Chicago Police Department is placing on digital evidence in conjunction with physical evidence. I briefly talked about what the ATCs do, kind of go through a day-to-day operation right now. So if a crime does occur, an ATC members are going to arrive on scene with the detectives. They're going to canvass for any video evidence, place an emphasis on recovering that video evidence, viewing it on scene so that we can create new investigative leads while we're still there, while the crime is still fresh. They have the ability to play hundreds of different video codecs, to convert those and make them playable for our end users, the state's attorney's office, defense attorneys, the public, if they have a vested interest in that video. They also have the ability to recover and download and process mobile cell phones while on scene or back at the detective area. A little later, I'll talk about how important cell phones are to our investigations and the increase in the number of cell phones we have actually recovered and now processed on a daily basis. The ATCs also have some geospatial analysis tools, essentially mapping tools. If my cell phone makes a phone call and I connect to a cell tower, that's a location. And if I have legal service, I can get that location from the mobile carrier and plot it on a map. If I recover a cell phone and there's GPS location in there, I can plot that on a map. It all goes back to us being able to tell the story of why bad guy A committed crime X. And this is a kind of a new one that we've dove into in 2022 is vehicle forensics. Those of you out there with newer vehicles know these cars are very smart. Depending on the make, model, and year of the vehicle, we can get things out of that vehicle to include speed, GPS location, which are things that everyone would expect, but we can also get things like the weight of the individual sitting in the passenger seat, the mobile device connected through Bluetooth to the radio at the time of it. We can get the date and time stamps of when a window was rolled down. Think of how important that could be in a criminal investigation. For example, you have a drive-by shooting. The bad guys steal a car. They go into the car, and what's the first thing they're going to do is they're going to connect their cell phone to the car to play music. And prior to going to do a shooting, they're going to drive up and roll the windows down. These are all things that we can now pull out of that vehicle once it's recovered and present for charges to help make a more solid case. Again, for us to get over that hurdle of not having witnesses or any cooperation from individuals. Next slide, please. So again, I talked about how the area technology centers have been a game changer for the Bureau of Detectives. It's increased the amount of murders that we've cleared. The important part of that, I would say actually the most important part of that is that this allows us to bring closure to grieving families. Now, you've seen those numbers. We're still hovering around a 50% clearance rate, which is not acceptable to us. We are doing everything we can to get those numbers up and up. We also want to lower, as a police department, the amount of murders that occur. That is obviously doesn't have to be said. That's in agreement amongst everyone. But these tools, the training, the dedicated personnel that we have in these technology centers have really helped us bring extra closure to a few extra families. This is one of those families that I kind of want to talk about, a case study. So you all, the vendors on the call, the bosses on the call have an understanding of how us, the end user, is going to use the technology that you provide us and how important it is for us to have this technology that really helps us solve these crimes. So this case study is a homicide that occurred in 2020, December 3rd, so right before Christmas. We have 4 suspects, no witnesses. The entire investigation was built on video and digital evidence. You can go to the next slide. This actually hit home pretty hard in Chicago. The victim of this crime, you could see him blurred out there on the left next to the red Jeep, was a retired firefighter who did close to 30 years serving the city of Chicago. He was in a good neighborhood going to get popcorn while hanging his Christmas lights. He took a little break, go to get popcorn, and he was going to head back. That's his vehicle there. You could tell he was very into Christmas. His vehicle's dressed up like a reindeer. And in the bottom photo, you'll see that our bad guys, our 4 individuals, arrive in a vehicle. Their intent was to carjack him because it was a very nice Jeep. I think it was an SRT, very expensive, very fast car. And that's kind of the trend we've seen with these carjackers. Our victim, next slide, please, was a concealed carry holder. Our armed offenders engaged in a gunfight with him. And unfortunately, our victim was murdered. These are some of the images that we were able to recover from the scene. This is all we knew. Our suspects were individuals. I can't tell if they're male. I can't tell their race. I can't tell their height or weight. I can approximate that. But what I could tell is that their clothing and that they got into a specific vehicle. You can go to the next slide, please. The ATCs went out, they conducted the canvass, they recovered all available private video, and they did what I call hopscotch. They went from license plate reader to public video that the Chicago Police Department, the city of Chicago has access to. They then jumped to a private video that a citizen may have on their house or a Ring doorbell. They were able to track this vehicle, the post and the pre, and that's really becoming an important aspect of our investigations. We're finding, especially at a time during COVID when everyone's masked up, that there's going to be some point in that day that they're going to be driving around, maybe at a gas station, maybe at their residence, where they are not going to be masked up. So we have to do a lot of legwork of recovering this video and this digital evidence to kind of put the pieces together to say that the suspect 3 hours prior to the murder is the same individual that we have committing this murder. So the area technology centers again went out, recovered hundreds of hours of video and multiple license plate reads for this vehicle. Eventually, we were able to get the vehicle, which turned out to be stolen. Next, we went into the vehicle and we recovered the information from the infotainment center. We did a digital evidence extraction from the vehicle, and we're able to find several cell phones that were connected to the onboard computer. It could be the simplest way to explain it. And what also happens is that the contacts of those cell phones downloaded to that computer, that infotainment center, and the serial number to the cell phone were there. So again, these are little breadcrumbs to bring us back to where our suspects are. We put this video out to the public, and you could actually look on the Chicago Police Department's YouTube channel when you're bored. And we put a lot of these videos out there because when people are masked up, it's hard for us to identify who they are, but think about it if it was your brother, your sister, an ex-boyfriend, an ex-girlfriend, you would know their mannerisms, their gait, the way they walked, the clothing they wear. So we went out to the public and we said, can you help us identify these suspects? They came back with some names that we then did some other legal service, search warrants on their cell phones, and we're able to tie them to that vehicle. This is a good success story of where the ATCs help. But what we found quickly with the ATCs is that what do we do with all this evidence once we've recovered it? Where do we put it? How do we store it? How do we share it? How do we play it? These are all issues that we started to come across quickly because of our success. Next slide, please. We recover thousands upon thousands of private video every single month. These are from citizens that put cameras on their houses or businesses that put cameras on their businesses because they want to know if a crime occurred in front of their location, and they want to provide it to the police. They want to be good citizens. They want to be people that are going to help solve the crime. In 2020, we recovered over 6,600 pieces of video evidence from citizens, and we extracted data off of 900 cell phones. Since August of 2022, we extract data off of 100 cell phones per month. Why am I saying this? The reason is our success led to new problems. The new problems were we don't have a solution to store this evidence. In the state of Illinois, for example, a homicide or a criminal sexual assault, there is no time that we are allowed to get rid of the evidence in that case. That includes physical and digital evidence, unless it's signed off by a judge. So theoretically, a homicide that occurred in 2020, I'm going to have to keep that digital evidence for the next 100, 200 years as a police department. Where do we put it? Where do we store it? Right now, I'm going to be honest, and this is what's going on across the country, because we've reached out to a lot of law enforcement agencies, is we're putting it on discs, DVDs, Blu-rays, optical discs. We're putting it on USBs, and we're sticking it into a bag, and we're putting it into one of our inventory systems, because the departments have not fully transitioned to a digital evidence age. We are still in a physical evidence thought process. What I mean by that is we have to have something physical. We have to have that disc, that USB. We have to have that hard drive put somewhere for these cases. What we need to get to is that cloud-based solution that can handle all of this evidence, and it could be shareable to all our stakeholders. Can we go to the next slide, please? What is available out there? I just want to kind of give you the sheer volume of that. We talked about 900 cell phones last year. This year in 2023, I know we're only 2 months in, we're going to do over 1,200 cell phones based on how many we're doing per month. These cell phones nowadays are over 100 gigabytes a piece. So I'm extracting almost a bit for bit full file system off of that cell phone, and I have to be able to store that somewhere and share it with my stakeholders. Video, this slide here, this is just a small example of the sheer volume of video available to us. On the far left, you're going to look at that. That's all our license plate readers, our speed cameras within the city of Chicago. The center one are all the locations that the area technology centers have visited. These are not publicly owned videos. These are citizens and businesses throughout the city of Chicago. And on the one on the far right, that is locations we haven't visited, but citizens have registered their cameras with us. That's just additional video evidence that's available to us out there. So you can see by the sheer volume, the number of video out there, we're going to come across a point where we have no more, no location to store this video, especially with the retention times that are required from us. Next slide, please. These are the emerging problems. I've kind of been talking about it on the last few slides. I found that there's a lot of solutions out there for body-worn cameras, and rightfully so. Body-worn cameras is a very important part of policing in 2023. Every officer at some point is going to have a body-worn camera on them, and I've seen the solutions. The Chicago Police Department has one of the solutions, and they do a pretty good job of being able to store that and make it available. But what do we do with the hundreds and thousands of different codecs out there? What do we do with the large cell phone extractions that we have to keep indefinitely? And the other pieces of digital evidence that are now becoming more available to us, like these smart vehicles. And then retention requirements. I talked about it. I have to store it forever. What do I do with it? These are the questions I'm kind of putting out to you, and I keep repeating them. But these are things that I know law enforcement agencies through across the country are looking for. I've gone to several conferences and spoke specifically on this matter, asking the question, and I find a lot of them here and there may have a cloud solution that helps them, but it's not everything we're looking for. What I mean by that is I need a solution that can intake this digital evidence. It could then authenticate, maybe through hashing or something along those lines, to tell me that this is the exact evidence that you recovered on day one as it is 100 years from now, so that we can introduce it into court, because that's a very important process of the rules of evidence in court. Being able to say that it's an exact copy or it is statistically the same as when you recovered on that day. We need solutions that are able to ingest all these different video types and be able to play them by a click of a button. Not for me to have to download the video, look for the player, and then share it. I need to be able to play it within that cloud solution. And then sharing is an extremely important factor of what law enforcement agencies are looking for. Most agencies may be able to, at some point, purchase the cloud solution themselves, maybe through grants or through their corporate budget. But they cannot get everyone, all the other stakeholders on board. They're not going to get the state's attorney to buy the same solution that they purchased. They're most likely not going to get the defense attorneys, the public defender's office to buy the same solution that they purchase, or the news agencies if we have to share a video with them. So what we need a solution that will easily be able for us to be, at a click of a button, provide that information to them so that they can quickly have it. And use it in court purposes. I know I have a couple minutes left here. I just want to take the opportunity again to thank Ingram Micro for inviting me here. I wanted to tell you a little bit today about the area technology centers and kind of focus on one aspect of law enforcement. I know a lot of the vendors on the call probably deal with the higher ups in the police department. I want to speak from an end user side of it to tell you about the problems that I currently face. Even though we've come up with a solution for other problems, it has created other ones. I also wanted to talk briefly about some things that Sean and Craig touched on. They look at it from obviously a higher level than I do, being an end user, but it was really interesting to see how things really fell in line with what I'm seeing on the end user side. On one of Sean's slides, he talked about the top challenges in the government. Staffing is the top challenge in government administration. He talked about insufficient staffing, outdated tech, insufficient budget, lack of trained specialized staff, and siloed data. Those are almost the exact same reasons that we created the area technology centers. So it was really reassuring to see that other people are seeing these same issues. And then on Craig's side of it, relationships. I deal with vendors on a daily, if not weekly basis. And I can tell you some of the best vendors are some of the ones that have the ability to create that interpersonal relationship and not kind of be that burdensome person trying to just go at you. They're the ones that come to me, ask me the problem, and offer me a solution or try to help me solve that solution and be honest about what their product can do. So Craig and Sean, I really appreciate that. Seeing it from your guys' level. It was pretty interesting to see that on my end of it, the issues are kind of the same, and your suggestions about relationships and listening to the end user are very important. So Brian, unless there's any questions, that's all I had for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant. We greatly appreciate your insights into the challenges and how you're utilizing technology today. Thank you so much for your service, and truly thank you for taking the time away from your day-to-day tasks in as well as your family and joining us today. So we appreciate you. Thank you. With that being, we're going to transition over to Adam. Adam's going to be moderating the second portion of this event. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Knobloch.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Hope everyone is enjoying the content so far. Again, my name is Adam Knobloch. I'm a senior sales executive here at Ingram Micro Public Sector, and I'm going to be moderating our vendor panel today. So the vendor panel is going to consist of basically like three categories, kind of the things that you've heard Sean and Craig and Lieutenant talking about, basically market trends, what's going on in SLED market trends, technical initiatives that are out there, and then maybe get into a little policy conversation at the end as well. So we have 6 vendor partners that are on the phone with us today. And before we get into the discussion, I want to go through a little bit of a quick introduction with them. So I'm going to ask each one of the panelists to come off mute, put yourself on camera, and just give us a little introduction to yourself. Just real quick, name, company, and your responsibilities, right? So I'm going to do a little roll call here to keep us on track. And actually, it's on the screen. So we're going to start right away with Mike from Samsung. Mike.
Adam, thank you. So Mike Bahniuk here. I'm director of our government business at Samsung on our display division. I manage a team that has a focus on the federal marketplace, and then we also have a team that focuses on the state and local. So Samsung is definitely committed to the public sector market as well as the both government, state and local and federal.
Thank you, Michael. Afton.
Thanks, Adam. My name is Afton Francis. I am a senior product marketing manager at Microsoft. In the US, I cover both state and local government and federal.
Excellent. Thank you. Adam.
Thanks, Adam. Hey, I lead our education strategy for North America at Dell. That's K-12 and higher ed. I'm a former elementary school teacher, and all of my career has been spent in education, have published a couple of books as well.
Beautiful. James.
All right. Thank you, Adam. My name is James Hawk. I am the Vice President of Sales Engineering for Cradlepoint for North America. So what does that mean? That means all of our field engineers that work with our partners and customers. We really focus on everything that we've talked about today and really supporting as best we can from an engineering side our customers and partners. So thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you. David.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me on. To the gentleman who preceded me, Pat and Craig and Sean, you guys did a phenomenal job. So thanks for doing that. My role is I'm a director of strategic initiatives at Intel. And really what I do is I try and help partners of partners, whether it's OEMs or the Ingram Micros of the world, help their partners in listening to end customers.
Excellent. Thank you. And last but not least, Scott.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Channel account manager for Targus, responsible for any and all that go through the channel for Targus.
Beautiful, beautiful. So gentlemen, again, thanks for taking the time out. Thanks for joining the summit today. I appreciate it thoroughly. We got some questions that I'm going to throw out there, just good conversation. And I'm basically going to designate a few of you guys to answer some of these so we can keep the party rolling here. The first one is basically we're going to talk some market trends. Okay, guys. So the first question, I think I'm going to start with you, Mike, if you don't mind. But what vertical markets are you expecting to produce above market growth in 2023? Is it state and local government? Is it K through 12? Is it higher ed? Tell us where Samsung is thinking and why.
So we've got dedicated teams that focused on each of those. Last year, we saw really significant growth from our federal and state and local teams, as well as our K through 12. We've got actually our largest vertical is K through 12. So all three of those are performing above the rest of our other sales groups, and we've got expecting the same growth next year out of all three groups.
Oh, interesting. All three. We like to hear that from Samsung. Some James from Cradlepoint, from the networking side, right? What are you guys seeing for growth in 2023? What vertical is Cradlepoint bullish on?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think the first one that is near and dear to our hearts here at Cradlepoint is our first responders. So if you look at, that's something that's always been a stalwart market for us, but it's so near and dear to sort of the use cases that track in that group. But, why is it going to be a growth area for us? There's a couple of different trends that were mentioned by, Sean, Craig, and Lieutenant Kinney. And that is both around mandated solutions that a lot of our first responders are being required to look at, whether it's body worn cameras, in vehicle solutions, really that group of accountability measures. So we're making sure that we're outfitting and making sure our product portfolio is moving in that direction. So some of our new products around even the R2100, the router on the roof that we just introduced, that's something that will really drive the growth in the first responder market, for us this year. A couple of the other ones that, hey, this is a big election cycle that's starting this year going into 2024. So we're working with a lot of local governments around election readiness, whether that's infrastructure or, as Sean mentioned, the security implications of some of the new technology that's being put into local governments, and understanding how to outfit and approach those use cases strategically. So, I would say the local government, first responders, and then mass transit is the final one I'll mention. That's always something that we're working with cities and governments on, around whether it's Wi-Fi on a school bus or whether it's bringing new technologies to the way fares are collected for city transit. So those are just a couple of examples where we see some anticipated growth in 23.
No, I think that's great. I mean, between you both, you kind of hit them all, right? So we got state and local governments from all aspects, K through 12, higher education. They are producing higher than other vertical markets that are out there today. So it's definitely in line with what we've been seeing. But let's get a little more specific on state and local governments. And I'm going to start with Dave on this one, Dave. You heard Sean talk earlier. He was our first presenter today, that state and local governments are forecasted to do about $137 billion coming up next year in technology. So specific to state and local, Dave, what agency is Intel very bullish on?
I think Intel, being a component ingredient of so many parts of the IT picture, Adam, we're sort of follow very much the sort of top 10 priorities that NASCIO has from that state and local government perspective. Mm-hmm. So it's about plugging into the appropriate areas and then being very patient with some of the long-term goals that are out there and are funded for the long term, like IIJA, smart city initiatives that are very, very long term. So we're plugged in on those. If you look at it from an actual agency perspective, I would say anything that's around sustainability, long term, EVs would fit in that space, right? Law enforcement is big. Healthcare is probably flat, believe it or not, from a state and local government perspective, but there's some big time stuff going on the back end of that. So I would say transportation is big. Anything around sustainability and probably law enforcement are always top of the list.
Top of the list. Excellent. Scott, do you want to chime in from a Targus perspective and attach in the state and local? Where do you guys see you're bullish on?
Yeah, we're hoping this year it's going to be education, I'll be honest with you. Last year was not a banner year for us from that perspective. We're hoping that more schools are going one-to-one and that we can be able to carry, connect, and protect for them. So we're really bullish, hopefully in 2023, educational side.
Excellent. So let's transition a little bit more over to some devices. So this question is going to be for Adam and then for Afton as well. With the abundance of clients' devices that were procured during and since COVID, I'm curious of what technical initiatives in education you guys are expecting to see in 2023 and how they're going to help some growth. So Adam, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'll expand on this a little bit, but K-12 and high ed, you're going to see a lot around cyber and AI on both of those. I think on the K-12 side, you're going to see a lot around interoperability. And on the high ed side, you'll see more on the multi-cloud piece. But I think my friends from Microsoft can agree. ChatGPT was kind of a watershed moment just for AI in general. Yeah. But that to me isn't really what's going to shake the market. It's going to be when those tools are actually built into all the things and the ed tech tools that are being used. And that's a transition we'll see over the next year. Obviously, there's going to be an emphasis on professional learning around this idea of what do you do when kids have access to information now, the way that they're going to have access to it. But it could help us really rethink, what we're asking students to do from a teaching and learning standpoint. Obviously, you know, cyber continues to be a pain point for K-12. The good news is at TCEA last week, meeting with a lot of CIOs, they're starting to hire people as directors or CISOs at that level because they know how important cybersecurity is, and a lot of attention, obviously from CISA, you know, and their recommendations on that market. So there'll be a lot of technical solutions, obviously available moving forward. K-12 obviously moving so fast into one-to-one during COVID. They did it at home. But coming back to school, they need systems that work in interoperable ways to make this seamless for the teacher, the student, and the parent. So you'll see a heavy emphasis on that. And then on the high ed side, COVID pushed a lot to the cloud. The bills are due. So multi-cloud will probably be more of an emphasis moving forward. And we're looking at that. On your prior question, I just want to be clear on the market from our perspective.
Yeah.
We see K-12 as being flat, high ed, maybe single digits. And you'll see obviously with IIJA over the next several years, you'll see a state and local, you know, positive. But we do see K-12 flat this year. And then 2024, you'll see a big bump.
And the reason for that flat forecast is basically devices are procured right now. They're ubiquitous, right? So we're thinking maybe another year before that comes to refresh.
Yeah, and stimulus, right? They want to hold on to the stimulus as long as they can, and then they'll spend it to get one more refresh, you know, as late as they can, and then they'll have to start, you know, funding that refresh on their own.
Yeah, so you guys are definitely looking at security. That's huge, right? Cloud, obviously, and then going beyond, we're talking about the refresh and starting the gate over again, correct?
Got it. Yep.
Okay. Afton, how about yourself from the Microsoft side?
Sure. You know, what Adam said was pretty spot on in what we're seeing with the market. While we are seeing a lot of, you know, devices that have been purchased in COVID times and not coming up for refresh, we're seeing customers think about security, student experiences, and how to, you know, future ready their students and skilling. And so I think that we're focusing on connectivity and security, total cost of ownership, as well as having, you know, one vendor manager from your hardware and software perspective. We see specifically in K-12 schools, they're looking at how to update some of the nuances and issues they've seen with their hardware and software purchases during COVID. And so we're really trying to go in and talk about the total cost of ownership and how those issues could be solved from a Microsoft perspective. In higher ed, we're looking at, you know, cloud as well, and how we tie device into Azure Virtual Desktop instances, as well as device as a service for students when they're thinking about like access and equity plays.
Okay, so kind of the same things though, what we're hearing: security, cloud, refresh is coming, but also you're talking device as a service, alternate financing options, stuff like that, to make sure the total cost of ownership is top of mind and they know where their spending is coming, correct?
Yes. One other thing we're seeing is esports take off, you know, and what that looks like in a K-12 school district, as well as some focus on our side on the private K-12 institutions in the US. But esports is really big in how we integrate that into a high quality performance device in order to, you know, run esports.
So let's stick with that, because that was a question I was going to ask a little bit further down. You know, Ingram Micro has started a gaming division here, right? We have dedicated resources across the gaming division, esports, so on and so forth, because Ingram does believe there is currently and will be future growth in that going forward. So Afton, sticking with you, from the Microsoft perspective, how many objectives do you guys have? How many goals, how many associates are you dedicating to esports and gaming going forward?
In education as a whole, there are a lot of people in the US that focus on education, right? And I just focus from a service perspective, but we're constantly trying to figure out how we integrate hardware, software, learning, fun, home environment, all while being secure. And so, you know, our devices give them that platform to be able to go do that and manage and run esports within school districts. But we see it's an importance just because we're trying to bring the holistic experience, learning experience to a student. And that's something that, you know, is up and coming and a top of mind in our school districts.
Yeah, cross pollinates into how they want to learn, right? People learn visually and phonetically, and that's also playing a role, being games that they want to play. So I'm going to go back to out of turn here, I want to go back to Adam and your thoughts about on gaming and esports with your day-to-day work life.
Yeah, I mean, look, Afton was correct in this idea that there's a social emotional context to this because it builds community. Most kids that are playing esports are doing it as part of just being somewhere on a campus. They're not on a team. From a revenue perspective, if you just look at it as the gaming aspect of it, it's not a huge revenue driver. However, when you start looking at all of the other things that are done around esports, like shoutcasting and video production and nutrition and all the jobs that are going to be created in the market, it starts to actually paint a different picture of ways that we can help school districts and universities. And obviously there's scholarships now, right?
Yeah.
These K-12. So we're focused on this idea of how do you build community, and esports is one aspect of that. And I think a lot of universities that we've been talking to and K-12s really are jumping on this, because there's lots of kids that just don't play traditional sports and they were left out of these types of things. So.
And Dave, Intel is inside a lot, right? A lot of devices that we're talking about here. So any feedback about gaming in esports moving forward with Intel?
Oh, there's a big play actually on our side, Adam. So we have a team of folks that is really on the consumer side, looking at gaming as a divisional thing within the consumer side. But then also on the education team side, there's a group of folks that are working on this. And currently we have a forum that gets together once a week, actually, or once every 2 weeks to discuss. And it's a group of students and teachers and administrators and vendors that sort of jump on this call and have pretty candid conversations, right from, hey, we just started this, how do we get any bigger? Or we've got a pretty good league going, how do we get better at that?
Yeah.
So pretty involved there. Yep.
And a lot of people involved, right? A lot of areas are just covered in all that. So it gets me.
Hey, Adam.
Yes.
Can I just add two quick things?
Yeah,
One
go
is
ahead.
to what Dave said. We started years ago a global research group for esports that's been going on now for 2 years. That's looking at all the different aspects of esports, which has been pretty awesome because it's not just about gaming. The other thing is we have a partnership with Microsoft called Girls Who Game that's been focused on utilizing Minecraft, but bringing in these girls in grades 4 through 8 into STEM careers and using Minecraft as a way to kind of bring about their creativity and innovation. And I think that's been pretty successful in helping to bring some of these girls into esports and STEM.
Excellent feedback. So a lot of areas there, which is a lot of workforce. And one of the things that we were talking about earlier with Sean, he talked about, hey, funding is not really a concern right now, state, local, and other entities in this vertical, right? The biggest problem we have right now is workforce concerns, right? Do you have the people to do the work and all that? So I'm going to go around basically, Mike, I was hoping maybe you jump in here, or Scott, you can jump in here, but resellers need help, right? They definitely need help. They do lean on the vendors like yourselves for help. So can you guys give some suggestions for the resellers, how they can build more strategic relationships with your sales teams to help them close deals, knowing that there's a workforce constraint out there? Mike, and then I'm going to go to Scott after that. Mike?
Well, so we're definitely relied on the channel. We're 100% channel fulfilled, so it's definitely a big part of how we go to market. And we really rely on the channel and look for qualities out of the channel that support us in terms of regional expertise, customer expertise. What contract does the channel own? Everything's fulfilled through the channel. We don't hold the contract, so it's really important that we really have got an understanding of what that channel partner does and how they go to market, what integration facilities they have, and really supplying and putting all the pieces together for the complete solution. So, we're just one piece of that whole total solution that's out there. So again, you can see there, we really rely on the channel. So all those pieces I think are important, but I think it really starts with the regional expertise. They know the customer. They go to the same church, the kids are on the same soccer team. We really rely, especially in the state and local area, for that regional expertise coming from the channel, from the local area.
Scott, from Targus.
Yeah, let me add to that. And Mike's, correct. The channel is very important to all of us. We have feet on the street that deal directly with end users. So building a relationship with our feet on the street can help tremendously. They can actually walk you into opportunities, help you through the process. And then from a flip side, marketing. We're always looking to partner with our resellers out there from a marketing perspective, either it's a show or event. Anytime we get in front of additional end users, we're looking at marketing aspects of that as well.
Excellent. So, Mike, I want to stick with you because you brought it up with about, how important are the technical and the service capabilities when Samsung's choosing a reseller to go to? You said the regional aspect is huge because it is, right? They know the people in the lay of the land, they know all that. But what kind of technical and service capabilities is Samsung looking for with a reseller partner with your interactive panels, so on and so forth?
It's interesting, coming back to the Chicago use case and Lieutenant Kinney and him describing the visual of how they integrating all these different cameras and all the different areas out there. And if you think about all the different devices that he's trying to connect, all that data is coming back to somewhere in the police department. And we're seeing that same thing across from the big police departments like Chicago, as well as some of the small areas, the smaller police areas that maybe just even convert an old break room into a new crime center. So they're putting our displays up is the cornerstone of these new crime centers or command centers or 911 centers. And all that pieces needs integration. It needs how they integrating the video, how are they connecting all this different connection devices to the cameras. So again, we're one piece of it, and the expertise from the channel and these AV integrators specifically is really important to us to make sure all these devices are connected. Again, from the smallest city police department all the way up to the big, fully funded like Chicago, and how they these smaller conference areas all the way up to the big rooms.
What about you, James, and Cradlepoint with the APs and end user devices? When you guys are looking for a partner to go with, a reseller partner and channel to go with, what like service capabilities best service Cradlepoint to work together on?
A great question. I think where we find the best meat in the market is around service capabilities, that end-to-end knowledge of the customer use case and the ability to go in together at the beginning of an opportunity and really that discovery mode and being with our partners and our resellers there all the way through sort of POC, proof of concept, testing and design, all the way through implementation, architecture, and really being a partner with us as the manufacturer, but also with the customer and understanding what they need out of a successful project, as opposed to just being there to carry a transaction, that we're really going in together in that end-to-end service capability, being able to not only spread awareness of the product and its capabilities, but understanding of the use case and then all the way through deployment. That's probably one of the most critical areas. And then from the field engineering, one of our best times are spent with our reseller and service partner engineers in the field working on real field testing through proof of concepts. That's where we bond together and share stories around other opportunities. It's where we are able to take care of our customers' needs and really take them through the whole experience.
And Dave, from an Intel perspective, same question, but let's take it to the end user. What end user technical priorities provide strong growth potential in state and local environments?
I would say, again, it goes back to choose your customer and then choose your partner and work the priorities together. Everybody talked about it all day long, was really be collaborative, be
listen,
a
right?
good listener, right? So just get everything together. And also there's a lot to be said for co-petition, right? I think that doesn't happen enough in the industry, where someone has an expertise and someone just down the road just doesn't want to work with them because they're a classic competitor. But the co-petition is actually helpful. And I think the critical part is understanding the end customer's requirements and then working on that. And the other thing is, let's just say you do that and they put out an RFP or something and you come second. Craig mentioned it right in the very beginning, which is you have to be able to provide the service. So just because you came second doesn't mean that you should walk away from that customer forever. A huge mistake, right? So technical priority, long answer, sorry about that, but technical priorities is really find out what they need and make sure that there's an alignment between what you do or a partner of yours and get those together.
That's excellent. So guys, we've got a couple minutes here, and I want to make sure we get into some little bit of a policy conversation here. So Dave, I'm going to stick with you on this one, conversations we had in the past here. But from a policy perspective, what federal grant programs outside of E-rate do you guys at Intel have on your radar?
So, as Craig mentioned, and there were so many, right? Those four big ones, CARES Act, IIJA, ARPA, all of those have really big tentacles, like long tails that are driving other information out there and other parts of those acts that may be called something different. The ESIF, I guess, for K-12, which is sort of ending right now in February for those, that's ending right now. But if partners go to the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, it's their website, I think, is oese.ed.gov. There's an entire page of programs and the offices that run those programs. Those are all federal grants that are sort of ongoing or may pop up here and there. But we're sort of looking at all of these grant mechanisms as a whole. They're just so many. There's so many more than you could actually imagine. And it goes back to what I said a little earlier. You can actually sort of choose your swim lane a little bit and then just go become an expert in that swim lane.
Yeah, there's so many of them, and the government's printing money right now, so it's a very good time to be looking at those grants for your partners and how to get them to do it, right? So I appreciate that one. So a little bit more, and this is basically going to be a group question. I don't have anyone designated for this, but I'm curious. Craig was talking about, he made one segment kind of a laugh a little bit, but he was talking about how politics have come into the play in the SLED market. I think we all know that when it comes to legislation, funding, and all that, politics plays a role. So I'm just curious, anybody on this panel can shoot it out here, but how important are lobbyists for your future growth plans for your company? So anybody here, Cradlepoint, Sam, anybody, are lobbyists playing a role? Is it going to play a bigger role? Is it going to help you grow going forward?
So we used a few for some regional help into some specific states, and they were very successful. Walked us right in the front door to Sacramento and California, and some of the all the way into the C-level office. Maybe some areas that we weren't able to get access to. So yeah. I would encourage that for some local, state-specific or some individually really specific projects, not really broad-based, but we had some really good success with it. So it's good to see.
It is good to see. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Lobbyists in your environments?
I'd have to say, given Intel's huge growth plans in Ohio, that those lobbyists were pretty effective, right? But we do see it quite a bit in the work that we do in talking to our partners, going into some of these meetings where it's a very big picture. We might have Microsoft or Dell or Samsung in the room with us, right?
Yeah.
Those lobbyists are very important to us.
Very cool. All right, guys, we got a minute left here. So first and foremost, I want to thank the panel coming on, right? Guys, taking your time out, participating with us, taking the questions straight on. I appreciate it. And a couple of things I want to summarize here, guys. I think what you heard all day long, and it's just been reiterated by our panel, is several things are out there. One, partnerships are huge. I think we already know that. Security is big. Esports are going to be big. Cloud is going to be big. And also opening yourself up and listening on each side of the fence is going to help everybody out with it. So there is a lot of funding out there. There's a lot of business out there, 137 billion in the state and local government, and we want to help you with it, right? So again, I want to thank the panelists. Great job, guys. I appreciate all of you. And I'm going to hand it over to Brian right now to get us through the remainder of the schedule.
Thank you. I believe that Katie, you are up next for E-rate, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Can you all hear me okay?
We can. You're good.
Perfect. So hello, everyone. My name is Katie Wojtanik. I'm a program specialist here at Ingram Micro, covering our E-rate program. For those of you who aren't familiar with E-rate, it's a federally funded program that provides dollars to schools and libraries for internet access and maintenance. This program is important for many reasons, but one is that it makes internet connectivity affordable for schools and libraries, which is directly impacting the learning experience for our students. This program is an example of seeing your tax dollars at work, as the funding comes from the universal services charge on your phone bill. And another reason is that there's 4 billion worth of funding available for schools and libraries, which means that there's plenty of opportunities for our reseller partners to get involved. And that's why I'm here today. I want to let you know a little bit about what Ingram is doing to make the E-rate process easier for our reseller partners. One of our main objectives is making sure that our sales associates and reseller partners are fully educated on how the program works. This year, we've hosted an E-rate 101 to go over program guidelines and best practices. We've also teamed up with our Cisco business unit to review specifically how Cisco handles the E-rate process as far as pricing, eligible products, and best practices when engaging with Cisco. In the future, we're planning on collaborating with even more vendors for their best practices, so be on the lookout for more webinars coming. In addition to content via webinars, we're working on creating a portfolio of one-pagers and helpful documents that reseller partners can easily access. The content will include frequently asked questions, our top E-rate vendors, important dates, important forms, our SLED playbook, and much, much more. And I know finance is talking after me, but very quickly, we know finance is a very important topic. Your credit terms that you currently have can be used for E-rate, but any questions or concerns about your credit line, you can reach out to us to discuss your options. Specifically for E-rates, Bear invoicing method, which is the billed entity invoicing, we offer Direct Express, which allows Ingram to invoice the end users on your behalf, which is nice because there's less money shifting and handling, and you don't have to wait for the funding, and it doesn't tie up your credit line. Finally, Ingram recently partnered with Navigator. Navigator is a platform that provides SLED IT opportunities all in one place. And this will allow us to keep up with E-rate opportunities out there and team up with our reseller partners to help them find opportunities that fit their capabilities. So that is just a preview of what's here to come at Ingram Micro for E-rate. And if you have any questions about the E-rate program or how to get involved, you can reach out to me at publicsector_programs@ingrammicro.com, and we'll be happy to help further. But thank you.
I think that's my turn then. Thanks, Katie. Appreciate it. So good afternoon, team. This is Anthony Sturniolo here, Financial Solutions Executive. I'm filling in today for Jeremy Covert on the Financial Solutions team, and we certainly appreciate you giving us the time slot today. So Katie, you didn't steal all my thunder here, but I can go a little bit into our financial solutions programs, and essentially what our team offers, right, is really a broad scope of flexible payment resources to help meet your customers' needs and in order to transact these deals. Now, our team offers both dollar buyout options where the end customer is going to own the equipment or software at end of term, or fair market value or FMV leases where they would be a refresh technology cycle. So we can support both of these different offerings through our financial solutions programs. We can also accommodate anything from a 12 to 60-month term when presenting lease finance agreements. So again, very flexible, our programs. Definitely want to evangelize these with your partners and, hop on any calls where we can. Now, we also offer and deliver a wide variety of options, including partners making monthly, quarterly, or annual payments for whatever best fits the determined budget. So don't feel there's a need to say no. Certainly, bring these questions to us. We can help facilitate any deals and offer any flexible solutions that we deem see fit, right? Now, in terms of flexible payment options, these can help encapsulate the total solution that you're offering to your customers. So they can include a mix of equipment, software, services, warranties, really anything can be implemented with these solutions, as well as with the growing demand for as-a-service models. So again, feel free to package these solutions as you would present to your customer, and we can find flexible options to offer. Now, in terms of benefits for our reseller partners, what does the data suggest? The data that we're seeing is that 77% of our solution providers are saying that it's easier closing deals with monthly options that they're able to position. And, kind of complementary to that, there's another 71% of these solution providers saying that they're closing more sales for more product. So if you're not asking these questions to your customer, right, if you're not presenting these options, then someone else is doing that. So certainly adding this into your repertoire would be of use for you. Another inherent benefit for our resellers is that they're receiving margin upfront for the deal in full. So what this is helping with and what we're seeing is that it's reducing any type of working capital challenges that our partners are seeing and alleviating those cash flow log jams that are inevitable here with the industry in the current state that it is. Our benefits for our public sector customers would be the preservation of capital and limiting days sales outstanding and enhancing their working capital initiatives. So really what we can offer here is that tailored payment direct to what the end user prefers and offer that flexibility. Next slide, please. And as Katie referenced, we also have our Direct Express Traditional and Direct Express Complete programs. So under our traditional model, we provide our SLED resellers with an easy, low-cost lockbox solution that helps supplement their MAID credit line with Ingram Micro in order to support financially strong end customers. So these end users are aware of Ingram Micro's involvement in these transactions. Now, how these transactions work are that Ingram credit qualifies the end user, the reseller partner on their behalf will do the invoicing and collection, and essentially then Ingram would provide that partner with a complimentary credit line to use for both their main trade of business and to increase the overall buying power. The program fee for this is $250 per purchase order, and we offer this on any deals that essentially you want to bring to us. We can have these credit qualified. Our Direct Express Complete program is a similar offering to our traditional. It's essentially a revamped flavor, if you will, in which Ingram does the invoicing in the reseller's name and collects on their behalf. So we're really, in this case, providing that back office support, allowing our reseller partners to push that easy button, so to speak. And the program fee for this program is $1,200 per purchase order. So again, two programs that kind of work in conjunction with each other. Certainly can leverage the traditional for certain opportunities or the Direct Express Complete for opportunities where it's deemed fit. So just wanted to conclude by thanking you for looking at our slides here, and feel free to contact us at Financial Solutions mailbox at financialsolutions@ingrammicro.com. We're happy to help with any discovery calls and assist with any opportunities that come our way. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. And once again, everyone, thank you for sharing with us firsthand insights into the IT mission challenges facing state and local governments. I'm sure you can see there is an enormous opportunity for all of us to help overcome those challenges with the transformative solutions you heard about today. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our esteemed speakers, Sean with the setting the market opportunity, Craig from the CIO perspective, Lieutenant Pat with the use case that was very powerful, Katie with E-rates. It's a great program that we have here at Ingram. We're really proud of it. And of course, Anthony bringing it home with the financial solutions. And also a big thank you to Brian and Adam for being our hosts today, and our marketing team here at Ingram putting all this together. And of course, our manufacturer partners that we couldn't win without. So once again, thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you. We appreciate the partnership, and we look forward to talking to you soon.